The critical reflection and analysis only really seems to happen upon failure. And failure is super important. So it's like, how do we get better every single day? So the thing we've learned was everything can change throughout a sales cycle. And something you heard a year ago from a senior person, it might not be true and it might have changed. Small things. Maybe someone was hired in a different team. Maybe their focus changed. Maybe something else happened in the business. But for us, the key thing was to go back and verify what happened in the decision process. When did it change? And just checking in weekly about the information we've got. So going to go on a deal review. Everything looks great. It's all there. Metrics are fantastic. Success criteria, paper process, EB's great. When did we last check that was actually accurate? Because things can change quite quickly.
Hey everybody, this is another episode of Elite Dealers. And today we have a very special guest. This is someone who reached out to our company when I just started. It's been a while. And today he's a regional director at LexisNexis, introducing Will Collinge. Welcome to the podcast, Will.
Hey, Ben. Yeah, thanks for having me.
And so, hey, for today, we're going to get into a couple of topics, right? The first bit, we're going to talk about a deal that actually went lost and kind of is, in play again. That the second part of this conversation will be about complex stakeholder management, true enterprise selling with you and your team, because you're a second line manager now, I believe, right? Second line leader. And then, since you are on this journey and on this initiative with your organization, we're gonna dive into some of the learnings you've already had, some of the pitfalls that people thinking about the same thing should be mindful of. So that is an agenda for today. So, hey, why don't we get right in and have a conversation around that deal that you didn't win just yet?
Yeah, no, sounds good. I think that it's really important to talk about deals that you lost. I think just to say that we had a great year last year. I have to preface it with that, obviously. Every single person got the target. We had 5 President's Clubs. It was fantastic. But the point being, like, the critical reflection and analysis only really seems to happen upon failure. And failure is super important. So it's like, how do we get better every single day? And I want to talk about a deal that we lost and talk about why we lost it. Because I think we learn so much more from failures than our successes. And it isn't a bad thing, as long as you don't make the same mistake twice. So I think going through the deal that we had last year, I won't go through kind of all the details of it, but it lasted as a sales cycle with a tier 1 bank in Europe. And it lasted about 18 months and we did everything right. We found the pain above the noise. We had a few fantastic champions, identified it, indicated it, implicated it, ran a fantastic POV, understood the decision criteria, the decision process. And, we had a great POV, went through the paper process. I'm kind of skipping forward quite a few bits, right? But got to a point where we got to the board meeting and we presented at the board meeting and we thought, this is a hole in one here. We've proven the metrics. We're going to save them X amount of millions of dollars per year. The customer experience will improve by X. The operational saving will go up by X. We presented at the board meeting. They kicked us out for the second half and made the decision. And we found out that we lost the deal, or it was a not now, but maybe later. And we just couldn't believe it and couldn't work out what had gone wrong. We'd done everything right. We had all the right champions. We made the EB. We had the executive level engagement. The metrics were there. The POV was successful. We agreed to the success criteria. But something that we kind of glossed over was the scope changed towards the end. And you might think scope increasing is a good thing, right? So an extra country being added, more value, more volume, etc. That's a great thing. What happened when the scope changed? It added one more EB. And it was late in the day. And I think we had 2 at this point, one more person. And we didn't go back to reconfirm everything we'd learned so far over the last 18 months. And what happened was, with that EB coming in, they were in another country that had a really specific data regulation piece that we didn't understand. And essentially, the decision process and decision criteria changed midway through. And we didn't know about it. And it was something that we couldn't really overcome at the time. But when we had the debrief, we learned exactly what happened. I think that the really key lesson for us was triangulating and checking and verifying again and again and again. So one of the things we added to our MEDDICC deal sheets and the way we run MEDDICC here is a separate column, which is when was this last triangulated, this specific piece of information, and who was it with? Because in these enterprise deals, you sometimes have 30 people on this org chart, and it's very political. So sometimes the things we hear are not true. So you can't take it at face value. So the thing we've learned was everything can change throughout a sales cycle. And something you heard a year ago from a senior person, it might not be true and it might have changed. Small things. Maybe someone was hired in a different team. Maybe their focus changed. Maybe something else happened in the business. But for us, the key thing was to go back and verify what happened in the decision process. When did it change? And just checking in weekly about the information we've got. So for the example, deal review, everything looks great. It's all there. Metrics are fantastic. Success criteria, paper process, EBs, great. When did we last check that was actually accurate? Because things can change quite quickly. So for us, it was a really important learning. And now we can go back with, I think, a better structure and different things in place to try and close it this year. But it was a learning we had to make.
Yeah, so I think first question there, because, no matter whether you operate in like a true enterprise environment with this many stakeholders or something more mid-market, kind of like the sliding scale of different complexities, right? Environments. It's not uncommon for a new stakeholder to come in somewhere mid-cycle and throw like a spanner in the works, right? Because that is what this sounds like. It also sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, that this wasn't necessarily like an economical decision criteria that you guys missed, but it remained a technical decision criteria on the basis of like a new country. Is that right?
Yeah, there's a specific piece of regulation that our champion didn't know about. We were concerned when the new person came in. We were just checking, like, is this still the same? But we only did it with one person, and that was the thing. Didn't triangulate and double check. Like, this new person coming in, what does that change about this?
So you did know that the person was coming in via champion, or was the new EB persona coming in completely information after the fact?
During the fact, yes. We knew they were coming in, but we underestimated the impact it would have. And I guess the point being, we trusted the champion to understand the impact as well, and they didn't either.
Well, and I want to go back to something you said at the very beginning when you started this very insightful story that you're sharing, which is that you learn a lot from mistakes and from failures, right? And, it's kind of like you don't fail, you learn, if that's the mindset. So I love that. I think that I would want to understand how you are using this example with your team now today so that this doesn't happen again. And you already said a little bit about like a triangulation reminder, but can you share a little bit about how you're taking this example and arming yourself against this happening again? Yeah.
Well, we carry the scars, right? So it's, it was paid for. I guess two things. One is talking about the templates we have and the different ways of doing the deal reviews. So now there are specific for every single criteria of MEDDICC, whether it be metrics, EB, paper process, champion. The separate points we review are: when was this last checked? Who said it? And how many others have you checked it with? So, for example, we have this metric that it's going to save this much time, which equals this much cost, which equals this much benefit to the business. When did we check that last? Well, it was confirmed in June. Right. That's great. It's a great bit of information you've got here, but that was 8 months ago. So I'm not saying it has changed, but let's just go back and double check that hasn't changed, because businesses change quickly, new people hired, people leaving. So that's the first thing. And then secondly, if there's only one person that information came from, I want to hear that from 2 or 3 more people as well. So it's going back and just checking who said it and when, and dating it. I think that was one of the key things we missed in our MEDDICC reviews last time. Was the MEDDICC was full. It looked fantastic. And it's changing every day, right? And it's collaborative. But there were no dates on it for specific bits of information. So how fresh actually is it exactly? And if you're working on a sales cycle that's more than 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, that can really come back to bite you. And then secondly, doing loss reviews. Like, it isn't a propaganda session. We're not going to give people pats on the backs for closing deals, or you're not going to get told off for losing deals. Like, as long as we do the proper analysis on what went right and what went wrong here. So I think those two things, changing the way we do deal reviews and the metrics we track and collect. And then secondly, doing the loss reviews and it being a safe environment to talk about them. Like, if you've made the mistake once, I'm totally fine with that. Like, we all make mistakes. You have to make them to grow. Making it twice, I've got a problem. But the first time, and if we acknowledge it, understand it, and then put something in place, it is what it is. Like, they happen to all of us.
And Will, is a loss review something that you do with like the frontline leader and the individual contributor, or more collectively with the broader team?
So I try to do it with the team. We're all so busy, right? Because we're actually trying to close deals at the same time. So I don't want to take up people's time by saying, hey, let's all get depressed about this certain thing. But like, if it's a deal that I think, if it's a problem that I think other people could face, and if it's something that I think has maybe happened before, then we'll do it with the team. So with other salespeople. But the key thing is it's a safe environment. Like, this isn't a play. We all know we've lost it. Like, we've all made mistakes. It isn't about that. It's about, do we know what the mistake is? And then what can we put in place to make sure we don't make it again? But creating that safe environment is so important, because otherwise it doesn't foster like people wanting to do it. And it is difficult, but it takes a certain type of person to be honest and open and feel like they want to share that so they can grow. And if you've got people that kind of have a growth mindset and want to get better, people will share where they've lost.
Yeah, for me, this goes 100% back to culture, right? Because if people feel that they can be vulnerable and transparent, and they are able to say like, hey, this is where I feel like we're struggling, like the collective can lean in to level up together, right? So when we think about everything related to MEDDICC, we also always say like, hey, this can only truly thrive when there's a culture of trust, and where people can truly, put their hand up and say, I've probably got an issue here and I need help, rather than feeling like, hey, the onus is on me. I'm the one that is supposed to make this successful, right? So I love this. And, when we were getting into this session, I said, like, we'll probably wrap up with a couple of like key takeaways. But whilst you were talking there, I already noted down like 8 different things, but specifically on the loss review, because I believe that this is a cadence that revenue teams and especially leaders should embrace more. It's like, make sure people understand it's a safe environment, right? Then consider whether the issue that you would take out of that specific loss review scales across the rest of the team in terms of relevancy, and make sure that you keep on underpinning it with a culture of trust. Is that like a fair assessment in terms of criteria to think about for leaders?
Yeah, for sure. We had a deal review today. Now, I won't go into the details of it, but we got to a point where people would only want to share their deal, that would only want to share their MEDDICCs and go through a deal review if it looked fantastic and if it looked great. But that's really not the point. It's like, we're all implicated in this together. So the perfect time to do it is maybe after one discovery meeting. The earlier, the better. And hey, completing it doesn't mean you win. Like, there's no prize for completing it. So having gaps are okay. It's fine. Like, I'd much rather have gaps than false information. So to your point, like, the culture is so important, and it is tough. It takes time, but it's really important that like it's not criticism. It's helping each other, because we're all implicated in it together. So having the team, having the whole team on the call, one person can take notes, one person can do research, and then the others can engage in like an active discussion. Well, actually, I had a very similar situation with a customer or a prospect last year. This is how we overcame that. And it's not, oh, you haven't done this. It's, have you thought about approaching it in this way? This worked somewhere else. And it has to come down to like how people feel about being vulnerable and sharing that in a team, about the safety of it.
Yeah, 100%. No, I think you nailed it there. So, I mean, I feel that there's a risk for you and me to really get very deep on deal reviews right now and talk about an hour more. I will park that for a minute, because I know that we're going to talk about learnings in your actual implementation, right? And an implementation and initiative that you are very close to. So can you talk to us about this specific deal that you lost and kind of where you are at right now with the account?
Mm. Yes, they're an existing customer of ours. I don't want to go into too much detail because they'll probably watch this, but it's about nurturing, right? So now we understand the regulation and we understand the specific problem that we couldn't really overcome. Now it's about nurturing. So we understand what it is. How do we try and overcome that? So there is something that's coming out, I think, in about 18 months that changes that regulation. So it's about being ready to implement by then. So in those 18 months, nurturing, staying close, having the regular catch-ups, and just making sure that the MEDDICC stays alive. So the pain's still there, doesn't go away. The pain's actually getting worse every day. So let's keep measuring it like it's a live deal. The sales cycle is extended, and we're not going to forecast it for this year, but it's something that I want that salesperson to continue to work on, because it will happen next year. So it's just trying to keep kind of like a long-term mindset on that, really.
Yeah, no, that's very clear. So, I mean, let's agree right now that once this deal has been won, next year we'll do another one of these and we can talk about it a bit more.
Yeah, there'll be another failure session and loss learned. Yeah.
For now, where I would like to go next for us, Will, is to talk about another deal that I know that we can get into. I think this is one that you've won, like immensely complicated stakeholder management within that account. So where do we start with that? Like, what's the first thing that comes to mind thinking about that particular deal?
Politics, and how to you try to ignore them, but you can't. And then it comes back to that triangulation piece I said before. So the sheer amount of data that you get is overwhelming. So if you have, normally you'll have, if I talk about some of these deals before, you might have a bank, a tier 1 bank on the board. You've got maybe 8 to 10 people, of which you've probably got 2 or 3 EBs across, let's say, operations, technology, and compliance for us. There are hundreds of people within those teams, right? So there are working groups that you meet with to advance the project. And the information you share at the board level is very different to the information you share with the working group, and vice versa. So I can think of examples where we found out some really interesting pain, quite specific pain, and some really interesting metrics for their business and the cost that it has to them every single day. Sharing that with the board, and then getting quite a few people in trouble internally because it goes back to that calling your baby ugly thing. So we did the right thing in the discovery. We had some really interesting information that would help the business case for all of us. We probably shared it in the wrong way, but with the right people. So it's like, you have the information. Do you share it or not? It's a key element of the business case, absolutely key. But in doing that, you're going to alienate a few people that could be potential champions. So what do you do? It's really tough, and it comes back to politics, and it comes back to documenting what people say and when, and then being honest about it and sharing it internally. But yeah, some of the lessons have been the politics are so difficult in organizations, and the sheer amount of data you get is overwhelming.
So, Will, and in this context, in the working groups that you are describing, these are more the operational groups. Is this where your champions would reside, or how did that work?
Yeah. So it depends. So if there's a live project, like for example, we have to migrate all critical applications to the cloud, there'll be a working group that are looking and like analyzing vendors that can help them with that. So you'll typically find a champion within that working group. Your EB won't sit in that working group. So you then have to, let's say you already have a relationship with that EB and you have a commitment to update them on a monthly basis. The working group want to control all the information, which is absolutely correct. And it's the way that the bank works. But you have those commitments and you have access to those people. So what do? You've made these commitments for these senior people, and it's the right thing to do to bring them along with you. But in doing so, you piss a few people off. And we found ourselves in that situation quite a few times where it's quite challenging to manage that. And I think the way you manage it is just by remembering that these are people, this is their career. Like it's some people in these banks, they've been there for 20 years, 30 years. Everyone wants to be the CEO. So you have to be really careful and conscious about that. Even though you've got a great deal and it's fantastic, you're going to save X, you're going to do Y. These are still people. And without them, you won't get the deal closed. So managing that's quite challenging, but it just comes back to the politics of it. Like I said, it takes a village. You need to bring everyone along with you, but in doing so, you do people off along the way.
Yeah. So then a question, as we are talking about stakeholder management, then just for aesthetics, this is like a big bank, multi-million-dollar contract, right? Many different stakeholders on their end, but how does that mirror on your end? Like, what is the amount of stakeholders involved on your side of the business?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, to give you like a quick answer, between 8 and 15 maybe. One thing that's really helped in my career is implicating senior leaders in my deals. I think that it's helped, just to be totally honest about things, it's helped to get exposure to me. It's helped to get exposure to my teams and the deals we do. But when you implicate them, obviously the key thing is you have that exec to exec meeting, right? So we have 2 or 3 execs that are plugged in to an exec on their side. They have their meetings. It's fantastic. They can help us move along, etc., etc. But when you have blockers internally, the exec is bought into the deal. So it's a lot easier to have those negotiations internally. If there's a product problem or a pricing problem or something happens internally, the most important thing for me is having the exec alignments, whether it be exec alignment across technology, product, actually not that often sales, to be totally honest. It would normally be EVPs of product or technology that can talk the same language as a COO and CTO. So yeah, it takes a huge amount of people. But that implication for leadership has been so important for us in these big deals. I think it's really helped us as well.
Yeah, and so in this context, how did you guys go about getting EB access and engagement going? Was that by implicating your leadership internally to begin with and then get them to multi-thread, or how does that work?
So there's a few ways to get it. I always think that if you have a project or if you have a problem, if the customer has or prospect has a pain, that you understand the hypothesis behind it and it's linked to a CEO, CIO objective or listed on the the annual statement for like a corporate objective this year, I believe we have the right to go direct. So for example, Mr. Mrs. CEO, COO, CTO, this is the thing you put in your statement. This is the impact. This is how we've solved these problems before. Can we set up a reference? So going direct, if the pain is there and it's stated and we've linked it to the corporate objective and you phrase it in the right way and it's persistent, etc., you have that way. I find events pretty good. Like it's certain types of events you do notice that execs go to. You'll see them speaking. So just little things like sending a LinkedIn message before to let them know that you'll be at the talk they're going to, just trying to catch them for 5 minutes afterwards. So going direct in a few different ways. But then, yeah, having the exact introductions, great. Whether it's their network as well. I think you'd be surprised if you have senior leaders in your business who have been there for a while or been around, how many connections they have if they've come from banks or come from big tech companies. So don't be afraid to leverage their network. And then the exec introduction is great. They talk to someone on their level. They're able to talk about the specific technology challenges on a different kind of wavelength to sales. So yeah, direct, and then using that exec, introduction as well. Normally work come from the military. They won't take a meeting with you. If you're not C-level, they won't meet with you. And it comes down to they will only meet with someone at the same level. So like you said, what can the AE do? You can just try and book the meeting, but you can't have it without the exec on your side.
Yeah, for me, it also goes back to something that you were talking about a few minutes ago, because much of this is based on trust as well. So as a leader, are you making sure that your team knows that you're available to enter in these engagements? And I think that if it doesn't happen, like if you're a leader and you're watching this, I recently posted about this, by the way, but basically my hypothesis is that if you're not in the trenches with your reps, they either don't feel like you can add value, which is something that you should solve for, right? Or they don't feel like you're available to it, and then you should solve for it as well. And then if you start treating it as a leading indicator, you're like, okay, I'm like first line, second line, third line, like I don't care, but I want to be in prospect meetings at least this much every single week and month. Then you can start making some real impact, right? Because as you say, like if there's no exec alignment, like many of these EB engagement don't help. So if you start to think about measuring EB engagement, and then as a next step, how to improve on it, much of it is in leveraging like the exec team that is on your side, right? And so that is like a two-way exchange, because whilst the AEs and the individual contributors can, I think pretty much all agree with what we are saying here, it still takes for that senior leader to make themselves available and to ultimately make sure that reps are finding their way to engage them. And so this goes to like every level of leadership, right?
Yeah. But to be fair, this company is great. If we need customer meetings, people will make themselves available. As long as, like my CEO has joined calls with me before with like a C-level at a bank, and you have to make sure you do the prep and they feel comfortable, but it's that they're willing to support, which is great. I think that it's a really interesting point about attending meetings. I've always thought that it's the most important part of this job. It's gong's great and stuff like that is great, but if you have a forecast meeting and all you can see is the comments in Salesforce or the stuff in the MEDDICC. Like, you need to be there and do it. You can't spend all day joining customer meetings, but like you said, having a metric, for example, I want to attend 5 customer meetings every week, for example, or a certain person, I want to join all their meetings this week, just to show that, we're all in this together. We are all implicated together, and it's something you can help with. About the deal, then you can coach on the fly. So it's super important. The last thing I want to be is one of those leaders that sits behind a spreadsheet or looks at Salesforce all day. Or that's the fun part, isn't it? Like, being in the difficult situations, being tested and challenged. That's the good bit.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you're spot on. And the only thing that I would add is that if I go back in time and I think about the best leaders that I have worked with, then I deliberately say with, because they were always there in the trenches with me, right? And it was not necessarily me asking all the time, but it was also them making sure that we were asking it. So making us comfortable to pull them in, and then leaning into to kind of hit thresholds like that, right? And I think some of these leaders have it a bit more naturally. Sometimes they have been selling up until like fairly recently. But yeah, the other side of the coin is where you get like that spreadsheet kind of, environment, which isn't great.
Yeah, I don't want to give him too much of a shout out, but like with my VP, if I said to him tonight, I need you to get on a flight to Amsterdam, he'd get on the flight because he's done it. I've seen last year, all throughout the year. So and then like you said, you feel like you're in it together. So it's so important that.
Yeah, team sport. Well, amazing. Like, that's a good shout out. If you guys do come to Amsterdam, let me know. I'm around, right? Just to get into like the last part here, because we opened by saying that, you work at a company where we get to partner with on a MEDDICC initiative. It's been 614 days since that first email. So what have we learned? Like, what are some pitfalls and things that you would share with anyone who is looking to do something similar? And when I say something similar, I'm referring to an initiative to embed MEDDICC into the day-to-day of how the team works.
Yeah, it takes time. Like, it does take time. Don't expect to do the training and then everyone to be aligned with it. You will have people that don't want to do it. I think that the beauty about MEDDICC is a lot of the best salespeople are doing it anyway. It's just about formalizing it, and maybe there are some parts we miss. So I guess some of the lessons are that it takes time. It's about the language you use. It's about the cadence you have. It's about everyone being on the same page. But, to start off with, I just did this in my team. So it was me. I think I started doing it in 2020 when a lot of my friends were moving to these kind of playbook companies, and I heard about MEDDICC, and I thought that's definitely something that can help me. So I did it by myself. And then after 6 months, you could see the results. And then we did it in my team. Then we did it in a couple of teams, and then it grew. So I'd say, to come back to your question, the big bang approach, unless you've got a lot of champions and advocates, it's quite challenging. So I'd pick a team or a couple of teams, run it for a certain period of time, and then you have the key metrics and things to show that this worked. We closed more deals in a faster time at higher value, for example. And also, it can seem quite, because I feel like if you have changes in sales leadership, every couple of years you might have another sales methodology or qualification methodology to go through. But this isn't this. So this works perfectly with our customer journey process. So maybe start off with a few key points. So, for example, the first few months, you just want people to really focus on pain and champion. That's it. Like, you'll get to the paper process when you get to the paper process. But for the first part, just focus on 2 really key elements. And then once you've got the buy-in, then you expand it to another team, and then you go to the whole MEDDICC after maybe 6 months. Because if we tried to do this across the sales team in EMEA with 200 people wouldn't do it. So we had to have countless presentations internally to show, like, guys, this works. Like, this was the situation before, this is the situation afterwards, and I'm one of you. I can tell you it worked. So manageable chunks, having proof of a team doing it and taking it step by step, but it takes time, like to make sure in the deal reviews, in the catch-ups, in the one-to-ones, same language. So yeah.
Yeah, I resonate with this a lot because I was a customer here before, pretty similar to the role that you're taking at your company. I had something similar at my previous company, right? And I would say that in organizations where you don't necessarily have a lot of champions and top level buy-in or real commitments, like this is how we're going to do it going forward, and you kind of get to the level, it's like, people don't do what you expect, but they do what you inspect. So it's in an environment of some rigor while still having this positive culture, right? That's all fine. But if that isn't there, you will see small pockets of success, and therefore your time to value with a MEDDICC initiative is just going to take longer, right? But I will say that I've seen some of our customers now where there was like that top level buy-in and like this complete approach with commitment and conviction and a plan to focus on chunks to begin with, but to get to a point of second nature with MEDDICC collectively across like 1,000 people and get that done in under 6 months, at least from an ability perspective, all being at the same level of proficiency as it comes to MEDDICC as a language, right? So it can be done, but there's a very clear set of ingredients that you need. And it typically starts with senior level commitment, and then through the layers of leadership, because leaders become like a force multiplier of any initiative, right? They create the environment in which this will thrive or kind of die down. And that's where you will see either, collective success or pockets of success. And the other thing is like, because that's what we always say, like, hey, not all MEDDICC is equal, right? So based on where you've learned about it, it's depending, or it's kind of influencing the level of depth that you have in your understanding about MEDDICC. So for example, if you've worked with us, you know about M1s, M2s, and M3s. If you haven't, then you probably don't know about it, right? Which is more about like methodology. However, like the depth in training and enablement, that's great. But then the next step is not all MEDDICC initiatives are equal as well. And so you need to consider these elements. And so for you and for me, it made a lot of sense to start with a small group because you didn't necessarily have the collective buy-in all the way from the top across like 1,000 people to begin with. That took time, right? But there are organizations out there that can do it like that. And then you get to a much faster time to value. So it's really depending on the ingredients that you get to work with and where, someone like you as a champion sits in the organization.
Every company is different, aren't they? Yeah. Strong sales leadership as well, I think. Yeah, it comes from the top down, those things. I remember like being on, just kind of digressing a little bit. I remember I'd be on the other side of the buying process maybe 3 or 4 times now, but it was really interesting being on it with you because as I was learning MEDDICC, I could see the situations I was being put into, and you were doing the right thing. You were putting me into quite uncomfortable situations around, we need to meet this person. I was thinking, right, is it the right time to meet that person? Okay, Pim's right, we do need to meet that person. But before that, you and I need to make sure that we're completely aligned on metrics and that pain is indicated and then implicated to the VP in a clear, simple, concise way. And then once if you have strong VP and strong leadership, it can work. Yeah, but that person has to be bought in.
Yeah, and what you're describing is also signs of a strong champion, because someone who challenges you before they give you access to like an EB persona is probably the best that you can get from a champion, right? Because ultimately it takes like coaching on how to win and empowering a champion to sell on your behalf when you're not there. Like the vested interest was clear, I think. But yeah, I think that there's a lot that behavior like that and pushing back a little bit. It's like, okay, we need to be really concise and clear on this. There's a lot that says about the power that your proposed champion at that point has. Hey, so Will, before we wrap up here, is there one other key insight that you would want to share here?
I think the success of it comes down to, like you said earlier, so the environment you create, and this isn't something it's about all of us trying to get better together. It isn't a case of you're being blamed for not having this or doing it that way. It's a case of, hey guys, we can all get better by doing this together. And some people won't want to join in, and that's okay. Maybe it takes a bit longer for them, or they see it in a different way. But the culture you create and the way you do it is as important as what you're doing. But yeah, that's what's been really important for us.
Sales and revenue teams should want to get into begins with a leader. The one thing that I really think hit quite hard from my perspective is like, hey, when was this last checked? Because things change, especially in longer sales cycles. if your sales cycles are 12 to 18 months, like this is something that you should do, right? So dating what the information, where the information stems from is key. The culture bit, like I think everything has been said about that, but that was definitely something as a key insight. In the last part, I think the focused approach, like, hey, this is what we'll do first. We typically refer to that as MEDDICC maturity, right? It's like, what are the behaviors that you are already seeing and where do you go next? Sometimes it's better to do less things, but better to ultimately get to that true second nature stage. So, Will, I absolutely loved having you on Elite Dealers. So thanks for contributing to a great episode here.
No, thanks for having me. It's been nice to talk to you for a while.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then we'll mark the diary in about a year and a quarter from now to discuss the win.
Exactly that. No, sounds good. Sounds good.
All right. Take care.
That's fun. Cheers.